Hello there. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do an assignment, how to commit your changes, how to push your changes, and how to open a pull request and tag your instructors so that we can grade your assignments, and then what to do after you've received feedback on your assignment. So right now, I have an R Markdown document open. By default, R Markdown includes a template, some example code to show you how to include some R chunks, how to actually knit the document, and how to include plots. You probably figured that out by now. But before I even start on this project or on this assignment, I want to make sure that I am working off a new branch, not my main branch. So in RStudio, I'm going to navigate over to my Git pane. For me, it's on my bottom left corner. By default, your environment and your Git pane is going to be in your top left corner. So if I navigate to my Git pane, you'll notice I am on my main branch. For the purposes of this class, and for any code or version-controlled project, it's a better idea to do any new development off a new branch. So I'm going to create a new branch by clicking on this purple branching button. I'm going to call my branch Example. When I click Create, you notice that RStudio works on creating the branch and tells you that a new branch has been created. It's now safe to close this dialog. Now, my working directory has been shifted to the example branch, and I can now work safely on this branch. So I'm going to go ahead and give my title of my R Markdown document, Example Assignment. I'm going to leave my name, today's date, and the output of this document is going to, when I knit, and it's going to be an HTML document. By the way, for those of you that are not so familiar with R Markdown, this is called a YAML header. This stores metadata for your R Markdown document. Right now, I don't need all this extra information, so I'm going to delete it. However, I am going to leave the setup chunk. This code chunk is a good place to include any necessary libraries that need to be preloaded when your document is knit. For the purposes of this example, I'm going to load the tidyverse. For this particular example, I'm going to just create a scatter plot of some example data that comes preloaded with the tidyverse called cars. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a level 2 header where I put the data. It's often a good practice whenever you're working with new collaborators to have an example or one line on what your data set comes from, the source of your data. So I'm going to say, and because I don't know exactly where the cars data comes from, I can merely load the tidyverse, put a question mark, cars. Cars comes from a package called datasets that comes with the tidyverse. If I need to reference any object within a package, be it a dataset or a function, you can reference its help documentation by putting a question mark in front of whatever it is that you need the reference for. So if I run that line, you'll notice down in my help section that this is the speed and stopping distance of cars. So I'm just going to write a one-liner and say, the cars dataset source is the datasets package. And it's always a good idea whenever you're referencing anything that is code related, either a function or a dataset, to wrap it in backticks in Markdown. If you're referencing a package, it's common practice to wrap the name of the package in curly brackets. Additionally, I want to make this italicized. To do that, in Markdown, that would be you would wrap your sentence around two asterisks, one at the beginning and one at the end. Now let's get down to the actual assignment. So for this example assignment, I was only asked to do a ggplot to describe my data in the cars dataset. So I'm going to add a new code chunk by clicking the insert button and hit R. And I'm going to name this code chunk scatterplot. I've already gone ahead and written the code that I need. So I'll just paste it right there. I need to preload the data before I can even use it. When data sets come wrapped in already inside a package, you can reference that data by loading the package and calling the data function on the name of the data set. So if I run data on cars, line 22, you'll notice in my global environment, cars is loaded. Right now, because I've not done any operations on cars, it's merely a promise. But once I run this line, this data set will no longer be a promise. I won't go into details on what promises are, but if you're curious, feel free to reach out to Ray or myself and we can explain it to you. So if I run my code, you notice that the data set actually appears in my global environment, that I can view that it has two variables, both numeric, and my plot appears. I'm now ready to submit this assignment. The first thing I need to do though, if you notice, Git hasn't noticed any changes on my branch. It's because my assignment hasn't been saved yet. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it in my directory under assignments. It's probably a good idea to organize your directory in a way that's easy for you to find any files. So for me, I like all my assignments to be in an assignments folder, which is a subdirectory of my course, my class repository, which is my last name followed by BST692. This is only for testing, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in my subdirectory for module 1. And I'm going to call this example assignment and press save. If you've noticed, Git now has noticed there's been a change to the module 1 subdirectory. If I go into files and go to assignments, go to module 1, you'll see my R Markdown document there. It's probably a good idea to make sure that your code your R Markdown actually knits before you submit your assignment. We don't want to be able to submit a pull request and have the instructors not be able to knit your document because of a silly error. Perfect. So if I were to submit this to my instructor, they could see my code and they would notice my ggplot. It works, so I can close out of it. But notice that because I have indicated to R Markdown that I want my output to be an HTML document, it has now generated a new file called exampleassignment.html. This is not so important for my instructors to view. They care more about your R Markdown document and that it can actually knit. So what I will do is I will go into my root, which is the highest level directory of my working directory, which is my Buzaba BST692. Go into the gitignore file. At the very bottom, I'm going to add star.html. This tells Git that it doesn't need to track anything that ends with the extension .html. Star in regular expression is a anything goes character. So now if I were to save my gitignore file and go back to my Git pane, you'll notice that the HTML file is now gone and the gitignore file has shown up with the status of M. M stands for modified. I want to stage and commit my gitignore file because I want in the future for any HTML file to be ignored. More importantly, I want to stage and commit my R Markdown. When I click on the Stage button, the status of my R Markdown document has changed to an A, which means it's added. This means that this file has not existed before, and you are now adding it for the first time. This is where it's a good time to commit. Clicking the Commit button opens up a new window that shows you the diff. Because this is an entirely new file, everything is going to appear in green, which are additions. You can see that there are 37 lines that have been added. This is what this means. Don't worry too much about what this, to try to decrypt what this means, but know that this is the amount of new lines that have been added. I want to leave a meaningful commit message. I'm going to say that I have added a scatter plot of speed versus dist. And then commit. This is just RStudio telling you that your commit has been stored. However, this doesn't mean that your changes are going to appear on GitHub. If you notice the information button up in the top, you'll notice RStudio is warning you that your branch, when it means your branch, it means the branch that is local, that is on your computer, is ahead of origin example by one commit. By origin example, it means the branch example that is out on GitHub. So to repeat, my version of example branch on my computer is one commit ahead of what's on GitHub. That is to be expected because we haven't done a push yet. Now, since there's nothing else to commit, it's safe to push. On a side note, I think it's a good idea to commit and push your changes so you get into the habit of committing and pushing. Once you get comfortable with that, you don't always have to immediately push after you commit. This is completely up to you and your development habits. Oftentimes, I will commit several times before I push my commits out to GitHub. So for example, I could be working on a project all day and have about 5 commits, and I'll hit push at the end of my workday. But for the purposes of this course, I really want you to get into the habit of committing your changes and pushing them to GitHub. So I'm going to hit push. This confirms that my changes have been pushed to the example branch out on GitHub. I can close this now. Now this is the important part. In order for your instructors to know that you are ready for your assignment to be graded, you need to submit a pull request. So I'm going to go over to GitHub. On GitHub, I'm in my Boozaba BST 692 repository. You notice that there are 2 branches. Right now, I am on main. If I go to example, GitHub realizes that I had recently pushed a commit 1 minute ago. It's advising me that maybe I want to do a pull request. So I'm going to select this button. Your pull request, for purposes of this class, doesn't have to have a fancy title. Because there's only 1 commit in this pull request, GitHub automatically takes the commit message and makes it the title of your pull request. This is okay for now. The important part is tagging your instructors. To do that, click on the reviewers on the right-hand side, click on the gear button, and add your instructors. You can add more than 1 instructor at one time. Now I'm going to create pull request and wait until my instructor has approved my PR. Okay, so it looks like 1 instructor has left me some feedback. Unfortunately, he did not accept my pull request. He requests some changes. When your instructor requests some changes, they will leave a comment next to the lines of code that needs to be changed. Specifically, they want to see a numeric summary of the variable speed. So I'm going to go back to RStudio and make those changes. So I'm going to add a new code chunk, and I'm going to label it By the way, our Markdown does not like code chunks to have complicated names, specifically spaces. Please keep your code chunks using snake case, camel case, and concise. Okay, so I've added my numeric summary. I'm going to check again to make sure I didn't break anything by knitting. And if I scroll down to my document, I now have my numeric summary of the speed variable. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stage my changes. Now notice that Git has the status M, not A. Because this is the second time I'm working on this file, I have merely modified it. This file is not new. So it's going to have a status of modified. So by clicking this check mark, I've staged it, and now I need to commit it again. This time, you're only going to see the last 6 lines that have been added, which is the numeric summary. And I'm going to say add numeric summary of speed variable. And I'm going to commit. I'm going to push again. Notice I'm still working on my example branch. This is important. You want to make your changes on the same branch. Otherwise, there's not going to be a way for your instructors to be able to approve your pull request. If I go back to GitHub and go to my pull request, notice that my last commit, add numeric summary of speed variable, now shows up in the pull request conversation. You can think of the pull request conversation as a timeline of all the changes that you've made on this branch. I think I'm ready to have my instructor re-review my assignment. To do that, all I have to do is go back to reviewers and click this refresh button. This button asks my reviewer to please re-review my pull request. Awesome! So it looks like my instructor liked my changes. He's approved my pull request, as you can see from the green check mark here, and my little PR button turning green. Notice that there is one approval. Although I selected both instructors to look at my code, one is sufficient. So now that my pull request has been approved, I can merge it. Merging my pull request will take the changes from my example branch and merge it into my main branch. GitHub will ask you to please confirm that you want to merge these changes. Now, you'll notice that the PR has closed. PRs automatically close once they have been merged. Please keep in mind that a pull request is associated with a branch. One branch, one pull request. Now that example has been merged successfully into main, I can safely delete it. Deleting this branch is only going to delete the remote copy of the branch. That is the copy of the branch that lives on GitHub. There's still one last step I need to do before I consider this example assignment complete. I will go back to RStudio. I will switch back to the main branch. Notice that RStudio doesn't detect my open file example assignment.rmd. This is because the main branch on my local machine doesn't have this file. This file only existed on the branch called example. But don't worry, we're going to fix that now. Now that we've switched to main, all we have to do is push this blue down arrow. This is called a pull. This pulls whatever is on the main branch from GitHub onto my local computer. When I do that, notice that assignments, module 1, example assignment.rmd has now been brought to my local copy of the main branch. The last thing that we have to do is now delete the local copy of my example branch. Unfortunately, there isn't a point-and-click way to do this in RStudio. This has to be done in the terminal. But don't worry, I will show you the commands to do that in our next lecture. That's it for now. I can consider example assignment complete.